We continue to get such stunning and disturbing images in all of this. So how did we get to this point? Let's go back and take a look at this timeline. In April of 2011, the U.S. slapped sanctions on Syria's intelligence agency in Washington's first response to the crackdown that Assad's government was putting forward to the anti-government protesters during the Arab Spring. We saw so many of these countries cracking down on these protesters, and it was particularly strong in Syria. Then in July of last year, Syria said that it could use chemical weapons in response to any, quote, external aggression that came against their government. And they promised, though, that it would not be used on the so-called opposition forces. Then a month later, let's move forward, President Obama warned Assad. He said the use of chemical weapons, he said if we saw a bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being implemented, that would be a red line that would change the calculus, he said, for the United States. He now claims that it did change that calculus for him. Then let's go forward to March of 2013. Syria's government and the rebels accuse each other of launching a deadly chemical attack near the northern city of Aleppo. And on August 21st, Syria's opposition has accused the government forces of gassing hundreds of people, including women and children, in the horrific images that we saw, many of whom were sleeping at the time. And it was a scene that has really stirred so many to action. And this past Saturday, the president said that he authorized the use of military force. He believes this is what we should do, he said, but he wants to get the backing of Congress first, and that's where we are today.
Also, there was no reaction from the Deputy National Security Advisor on the president's plan for Syria and whether or not the U.S. will send soldiers in on the ground. Here's the exchange he had, listen closely now, with Bret Baier when asked about possible U.S. assistance.
So that sounds like boots on the ground to me, Tony.
No, not boots on the ground in terms of soldiers. There's an international organization, for example, in a peaceful environment. If there's peace, an international organization pursuant to the Chemical Weapons Convention that works on disposing of chemical weapons, the Syrians themselves would have the ability to do that with equipment that could be brought in. There are different ways of doing it. There are not going to be American boots on the ground.
All right. So Mr. Blinken also saying that he is certain that Congress will decide in the end to support the president's plan.
Quick look here, too, Martha, about what's happening on the ground in Syria. 3 different groups are fighting on 2 different sides. In yellow, you have the regime stretching from the capital city, Damascus, up to Homs, that central area of the country now. The other side, the rebels, they have controlled the city of Aleppo for some time, the largest city in the country, controlling this area here and down around the southern border with Jordan and one neighborhood just east of Damascus. Now, the foreign fighters, the jihadists, big stretch here along the Iraqi desert. That is desert country in Syria, even today, and up here around the northern border with Turkey. These are the 3 areas now that have been watched now as the fighting goes back and forth. If there is a strike, look for the central part of the country to take the brunt of that. Damascus up to Homs, which would appear to be anyway, where many of the targets would be on behalf of the regime. So we're watching all this. You know, a lot of people thought, a couple weeks ago, you go in, you hit them with a strike there, you take out the airport or the airstrip, and you go home. Or you go after the chemical weapons. And how do you do that? And where have they moved now? So all this now is being factored into what could or might happen in Syria.
And others believe that with each passing day, the dynamic changes on the ground in terms of who are the strongest among these rebel groups. Very complicated to understand all of these groups because the Pentagon estimates that there are as many as 1,200 different groups. Many of them support each other and are working together. Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham support the Free Syrian Army, the FSA. That was formed in August of 2011, which many think was the moment to come in and back them. That did not happen at that time. It was formed by army defectors from Assad's regime, and they were working to depose Bashar al-Assad at that point. The opposition forces claim to have about 100,000 fighters.